Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Templeton Prize ceremony. Please welcome the 2016 Templeton Prize laureate, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Pina Templeton, and I am the wife of Jack Templeton, my husband and my best friend. On behalf of the Templeton Foundation, my late husband, Dr. Jack Templeton, and my late father-in-law, Sir John Templeton, may I extend to all of you gathered here at Central Hall Westminster, and to everyone who will be watching online, a very, very warm welcome to the 2016 Templeton Prize ceremony. It is a great joy for my daughters, our cousins Templeton, as well as our foundations in Pennsylvania and the Bahamas, to be joined by all of you here tonight as we honor the 2016 Templeton Prize laureate, Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. He is the 46th laureate since Sir John created the annual prize in 1972. To understand why Sir John founded the prize, we must first understand who was Sir John. For many, he was a close friend and neighbor. For others, he was the world investment genius. To his children, he was a loving and attentive father. For his grandchildren, he was the grandfather who, although very busy, had always time to listen and give very wise advice, especially when matters of the heart were concerned. To me, he was Papa, my second father, who would often introduce me as his daughter, confusing everyone. You can see why when Sir John died, for me it was like losing my father all over again. For Sir John, the prize was a part of his quest for spirituality. The prize was the result of his belief that the pursuit of the spiritual is one of the most important yet neglected disciplines. He wanted the Templeton Prize to foster that pursuit through discovery of the limitless potential of the spirit. The essence of his vision he summarized as spiritual progress. Sir John envisioned the prize would identify entrepreneurs of the spirit, those who devote their talents to expanding our vision of the intangible and deeper realities of human purpose and ultimate reality. Indeed, Sir John's words that were so often emphasized by my husband Jack help explain Sir John's vision for the prize. No person, not even 1%, would they know of 1% of the infinite creative spirit. To learn anything, we must first become humble and get rid of the egotistical idea that we already know everything about God. The John Templeton Foundation stresses that questions, when framed in humility, create an open mind, which makes it possible for us to learn. From such a passion for learning, he saw the possibility of new glimpses of a larger and timeless truth, which is beautifully summarized in the motto of the foundations: how little we know, how eager to learn. And now I would ask your permission to tell you one tidbit story. I would like to tell you of the heart of Rabbi Sacks, his kindness, his humility, and his willingness always to help. Jack and I first met Rabbi Sacks when Sir Sigmund Sturmer decided that we should meet Rabbi Sacks. And any of you know Sir Sigmund, you know that if he decides that you should meet someone, you best meet that person. For Jack, it was an instant friendship. Jack so admired Rabbi Sacks' wisdom that we began to buy as many of the rabbi's books as we could find, which then became the basis for many of Jack's speeches. In our home, we have for some time the Rabbi Sacks bookshelf, which is a very long bookshelf. It was then only natural that when Jack funded a lecture for his father, that Rabbi Sacks would be one of the first speakers. As busy as Rabbi Sacks was and is, he accepted the invitation. What Rabbi Sacks may not know is that for the lecture, we had to change venue 3 times because we kept running out of space. So many subscribers, everyone wanted to listen to Rabbi Sacks' lecture. Something that had never happened before, we were not accustomed to it, and it's never happened since. We were then told that we were to make sure that Rabbi Sacks and Mrs. Sacks would enjoy their morning. The decision was made to visit Philadelphia by way of the old-fashioned trolley. Well, because of Rabbi Sacks' stature, we availed ourselves of what would then become the private trolley. A wonderful guide by the name of Henry was to show us the sights, while the city of Philadelphia provided us with 4 plainclothes detectives for the safety of Rabbi Sacks and Mrs. Sacks. 2 detectives were with us on the trolley, and the other 2 followed us in an unmarked car. Well, Rabbi Sacks really enjoyed his ride. And at the conclusion of the tour, he told us he had not been on public transportations in many years, and it really had been fun. Well, I chuckled to myself, but said nothing. Well, then that really had not been public transportation. Not with the help we had. That was special transportation. The day concluded with Rabbi Sacks delivering his remarks to a very attentive audience, who at the end of the lecture arose giving Rabbi Sacks a well-deserved and very thunderous applause. This, ladies and gentlemen, is one aspect of Rabbi Sacks' heart, always to be there, always with his wisdom, always with his humility. Thank you. And now, it gives me great, great pleasure to introduce the Shabbaton Choir, and under the musical director of Stephen Levy, and pianist Stuart Izan. I hope I didn't ruin that too much. And the soloist Rabbi Lionel Rosenfeld and Johnny Turgle, performing the song Esa Ene, composed by Stephen Levy, with words from Psalm 121. I lift my eyes to the mountain. From where does my help come? The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. The choir.
ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומריך. הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל. השם שומריך, השם צילך על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יכך וירח בלילה. השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. השם ישמור את צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם.
Dr. Templeton Pina, Mrs. Heather Templeton Dill, Heather, Rabbi Lord Sacks, Jonathan, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's my very great honor to be invited to speak on this occasion, to say something of the legacy of Sir John Templeton, and to thank the John Templeton Foundation for making this event possible. I'd like to start by saying a few words about the man whose vision has brought us together this evening, namely Sir John Templeton. I had the good fortune to know Sir John well and had many conversations with him on subjects ranging from the global economy, innovation and investment strategy to history, education, even to theology. He was a man who combined an extraordinary breadth of vision, intellectual curiosity, and professional competence. Not only that, but he had a generosity of spirit as well as a personal modesty, and I have to say, and your speech reminded me of it, Pina, a great sense of humor as well. He was born in 1912 in the small town of Winchester, Tennessee, attended Yale University, supported himself during the Great Depression, graduated in 1934 near the top of his class, was a Rhodes Scholar at Balliol College, Oxford, and graduated from there with a law degree in 1936. He started his career on Wall Street in 1938 and entered the mutual funds industry in 1954, where he created some of the world's largest and most successful international investment funds. His strategy was buy low, sell high, but he took it to a new dimension in terms of picking countries, picking industries, and picking companies which were hitting rock bottom, something he called points of maximum pessimism. I'm sure he'd have loved being alive today. However, his interests were never confined simply to the financial world. He devoted the second half of his long life to promoting the discovery of what, as Pina said, he called new spiritual information. And in this quest, he was an unfailing optimist, a believer in progress, and a relentless questioner. The spiritual quest was never limited to matters usually considered religious. For him, this question, on the one hand, included the deepest realities of human nature. Who am I? What am I here for? Is there more to life than material existence? But he was also interested in what he saw as the remarkable mysteries of the physical world. And he believed these were subjects best investigated not just through philosophy and religion, but also by using the tools of modern science. He was convinced that our knowledge of the universe is still very limited, and his great hope was to encourage all of humanity to be more open-minded about the possible nature of ultimate reality and the importance of the divine. Although Sir John was a Presbyterian elder, he espoused what he called a humble approach to theology. He believed that there was much more to be known about the divine than simply through revelation. Indeed, he predicted that science may be a gold mine for revitalizing religion in the 21st century. He once said, "All of nature reveals something of the Creator." Because of this, you may well have concluded that Sir John's own theological views conform to no orthodoxy, and you would be right to do so. He was eager to learn from all of the world's faith traditions. In fact, he said, "What I'm financing through the prize is humility. I want people to realize that you shouldn't think you know it all." These words made a huge impact on me, because what I especially noticed about him was that he lived it. Although a very wealthy man, a multi-billionaire, he was extraordinarily humble. So in 1972, he established the Templeton Prize as one of the world's largest awards given to an individual. The prize, has been said, honors a living person who has made an exceptional contribution to affirming life's spiritual dimension, whether through personal insight, scientific discovery, or practical endeavor. Its monetary value has always exceeded the Nobel Prizes, which was Sir John's way of underscoring his view that advances in spiritual understanding are no less important than in other areas of human endeavor. And over the last 45 years, the distinguished roster of Templeton Prize laureates, as well as the judges, have included representatives of the Christian faith, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism. The prize has been awarded to scientists, philosophers, philanthropists, theologians, writers, reformers. And what all these people have in common is a commitment to exploring what he called the big questions, which are at the core of the mandate he set for the John Templeton Foundation. And some prizes have been given to people who've demonstrated the transforming power of virtues, such as love, forgiveness, and gratitude. Others who provided new insights into scientific and philosophical problems, difficult issues such as infinity and the purpose in the cosmos. And still others have used the analytical tools of the humanities to provide new perspectives on the spiritual dilemma of modern life. I believe the Templeton Prize, which is why I've made a commitment to it, is even more relevant today than when Sir John established it. Since that time in this country and the countries of Northwest Europe, we have seen the privatization of religion, of faith and spirituality. Matthew Arnold expressed this so well in his poem, Dover Beach, where he wrote about the melancholy, long withdrawing roar of the sea of faith. And he concluded, "And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night." Could be a comment on almost any television 10 o'clock news program. That was written nearly 150 years ago, but speaks, I believe, more powerfully than ever today. Because religion and faith, despite the secularization of Northwest Europe, are powerful forces in our world, sometimes for good. Just think of Pope Francis's encyclical on caring for the environment, caring for creation, the growth of the Christian church in China, but sometimes for ill, global terrorism, and the evil rise of anti-Semitism. There can never have been a time when the issues which Sir John raised and which the Foundation is addressing have had greater significance than the present. It would be remiss of me this evening if I mentioned only the legacy of Sir John Templeton. We also owe a huge debt to Jack, his son, who was a friend, his wife, Pina, and their children, Heather and Jennifer. Jack himself was a distinguished medical doctor and a head of pediatric surgery at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. He retired early to head up the foundation. He had a similar intellectual curiosity and breadth of vision as his father. And while he was a person of devout Christian faith, he was totally committed to exploring the insights of other faiths, as well as supporting scientific research. He was a great student of history, not least British history, not least Churchill, and loved the work of the foundation, to which he devoted himself unstintingly. For those of us who support the John Temple Foundation and the Templeton Prize, I would like to say how delighted we are that Jack's family, Pina, Heather, and Jennifer, are continuing in the footsteps of Sir John in devoting themselves to the work of the foundation, and indeed in the footsteps of their father. Sir John died in 2008 at the age of 95. Tributes from around the world recognize the breadth of his career and the extraordinarily generous legacy he's left us. Ladies and gentlemen, we remember and celebrate this evening the vision of Sir John Templeton in creating this prize and foundation, and we thank the family for taking it forward for a future generation. And to you, Jonathan, Rabbi Lord Sacks, we offer our congratulations on being awarded such a prestigious honor. Thank you.
That's a difficult act to follow, but I will try. Good evening. I am Heather Templeton Dill, the president of the John Templeton Foundation. And to echo my mother and Lord Griffiths, on behalf of the John Templeton Foundation, in memory of my father and my grandfather, I'm so happy to welcome you to the 2016 Templeton Prize ceremony. The Templeton Prize is given annually to a living person who has made an exceptional contribution to affirming life's spiritual dimension through insight or discovery or practical works. As you have heard earlier, the essence of Sir John's vision for the prize is spiritual progress. The Nobel Prizes honor discoveries in science and in literature and in peacemaking. The Templeton Prize recognizes those who have advanced our understanding of spiritual realities, something Sir John felt Alfred Nobel had overlooked. Sir John was an optimist, and he foresaw a day when new information from research on spiritual realities might reduce conflict between all religions. He felt that from such research, people would come to acknowledge a rich diversity of spiritual information which could be universally accessible to all people. Rabbi Lord Sacks has been awarded the prize precisely for bringing such spiritual insight to the public conversation through mass media, popular lectures, and over 25 books. But do you know, Rabbi Sacks may well have led a very different life. In Rabbi Sacks's book, Lessons in Leadership, Rabbi Sacks writes about his first visit to the United States in 1968. It was 1 year after the Six-Day War in June 1967, and it seemed as if Israel, he writes, was facing a massive onslaught by its neighbors. We, the generation born after the Holocaust, felt as if we were about to witness, God forbid, a second Holocaust. He was a student of secular philosophy at Cambridge, at a time when being a philosopher, in Britain at least, almost certainly meant that you were an atheist, or at the very least, an agnostic. Rabbi Sacks wanted to know how Jewish thinkers in America were responding to these challenges, and so he came to America to meet as many rabbis and Jewish thinkers as possible, to understand where they were spiritually and intellectually. One of those he hoped to meet was Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, a pioneer in Jewish outreach in the US who had turned his Hasidic group outwards to campuses and communities that had never previously encountered such a type of orthodoxy. After being told repeatedly that a meeting with the Rebbe would be impossible, one Sunday night the phone rang and a short meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. That afternoon, the Rebbe patiently answered the questions of the young student Jonathan Sacks, and then reversed roles and began to ask questions of his own. How many Jewish students were there at Cambridge? How many engaged with Jewish life? How many attended synagogue? Only about 10% of Jewish students were engaged with Jewish life, Sacks responded. And then the Rebbe asked him, so what are you doing about this? This was unexpected. And Rabbi Sacks writes that he began to respond, in the situation in which I find myself, but the Rebbe stopped him and let the sentence go no further. You do not find yourself in a situation, he said. You put yourself in one situation, and then you can put yourself in another situation. Rabbi Sacks further explains how it soon became clear to him what the Rebbe was doing. He was challenging Rabbi Sacks to act. Something was evidently wrong with Jewish life in Cambridge, and the Rebbe was encouraging Rabbi Sacks to get involved, to do something, to change the situation. And so, Rabbi Sacks did precisely that. Over the next nearly 50 years, he simply put, has changed the situation. And that is why we honor Rabbi Sacks this evening. During his service as chief rabbi, from 1991 to 2013, he revitalized Britain's Jewish community. And he encouraged the Jewish community in Britain to share the ethics of their faith with a broader cultural audience. In doing so, Rabbi Sacks articulates a vision of human flourishing in which people of different faith traditions appreciate and respect those who practice a different faith. My grandfather thought that humility was rare among contemporary religious leaders. He hoped that religious leaders and religious adherents alike could overcome dogmatism. It would be far more constructive, he wrote, to promote humility, so that we might be more inclined to listen with an open heart and an inquiring mind. Sir John also said, there are two ways of unifying mankind, by coercion or by sympathy and affection. And you might well imagine that Sir John concluded, the truly creative force is by sympathy and affection. Rabbi Sacks knows the power of that creative force and has put it into practice throughout his career. In his nomination of Rabbi Sacks for the prize, Lord George Carey wrote that Rabbi Sacks has been a voice of reason and toleration, forgiveness and reconciliation, moral inspiration and intellectual courage. Speaking at the House of Lords in 2011, the Bishop of London, the Right Reverend and Right Honorable Richard Sharch, echoed that same point. Rabbi Lord Sacks, he said, has done more than almost anyone to provide us with a vocabulary, a grammar that commends and communicates the dignity of difference. We at the John Templeton Foundation are delighted that the judges for the Templeton Prize acknowledged Rabbi Lord Sacks' commitment to diversity and difference, his ability to communicate these ideas effectively, and the ways in which he put his ideas to work by creating new organizations, befriending religious leaders from many faith traditions, and encouraging the Jewish community to deepen its faith, its tradition, and its outreach. Before I close, I have a bit of a surprise for everyone, although some of you who have paged through the program booklet may have already noticed. May I please direct your attention to the video screens. If you are familiar with the history of the Templeton Prize, you will recall that the prize was presented to each year's laureate by His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, usually at a private reception at Buckingham Palace. Although the first presentation to Mother Teresa in 1973 was at a public ceremony at Guildhall. That tradition continued straight through until 2011, and here you see His Royal Highness presenting the prize to Lord Martin Rees. Prince Philip turned 90 years old that year and relinquished many of these public duties. So we were extremely grateful earlier this year, once the identity of this year's laureate was known, to be invited to Clarence House by His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, for a private reception in honor of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. Prince Charles, who once described Rabbi Sacks as a light unto this nation, expressed delight at the choice of this year's Templeton Prize laureate. He praised Rabbi Sacks' contribution to British society, spoke of their personal friendship, and presented Rabbi Sacks with the Templeton Prize pyramid. It was a great joy for me personally and on behalf of the John Templeton Foundation to present His Royal Highness with this beautiful bowl engraved with the Tree of Life design, which is the basis of the Templeton Prize medallion and which you can learn about on the first page of your program booklet. And we were delighted to be joined for that presentation by Lord Griffiths. Also with us at Clarence House that afternoon were Lady Elaine Sacks, their children, Josh, Dina, and Gila, together with their spouses, along with representatives from the Office of Rabbi Sacks and some of my colleagues from the John Templeton Foundation. Following the introduction of each guest, His Royal Highness engaged in conversation with Rabbi Lord Sacks and those of us who were honored to be in attendance. it was an extraordinary privilege to be at Clarence House that afternoon, and now, especially, to be able to share it with all of you here this evening. I'm sure I speak for Rabbi Sacks and his entire family and office team by expressing our deep gratitude to His Royal Highness and to everyone at Clarence House for their warm and gracious hospitality. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation of our event at Clarence House. And now, Rabbi Lord Sacks and Lord Griffiths, please join me for the presentation of the 2016 Templeton Prize.
There are 6 symbols here. There's the Torah, the scroll, the menorah, the tree of life, the dove, sign of peace following Noah, 25 for the 25 books you've written. And here,
for the next one.
Next to me here is a quill, a pen, into a bottle which is marked ink. So Jonathan, that is the symbolism of the Templeton Prize being awarded to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Rabbi Sacks, this is the Tree of Life medallion, which represents the breadth and the depth of the purpose and vision of the Templeton Prize. This is the important part. The rest is pomp and circumstance. This is the prize. This is the check for your work and your ministry and a lifetime of exemplary service.
Thank
For
you.
Congratulations.
Great to learn. Beloved friends, the news that I had won this prize almost rendered me speechless, an event that would have been unprecedented in the history of the rabbinate. But not quite. But it has left me moved, humbled, thankful, and deeply motivated. I want to express my deep sense of gratitude to and kinship with the Templeton family, to the memory of the late Sir John, whose vision still drives the prize and the foundation that bears his name, to the memory of his son, the late Dr. Jack Templeton, who so ensured its continuity, but also and especially to Jack's wife, Pina, and their daughters, Heather Templeton Dill and Jennifer Templeton Simpson, who beautifully embody a combination of leadership and humility that is so rare and so precious. Elaine and I had the privilege of visiting the Templeton Foundation headquarters in April of this year, and we were so impressed and inspired by the range and quality of the programs it supports and the vision that underlies them. May you continue to bring blessings to the world. And our thanks in particular to Joanna Armand, Lynn Coletta, and Don Lair for everything surrounding tonight and the other events related to the prize. Pina, I loved your speech, but I didn't know until now that all those passengers on the bus were plainclothes policemen. This is a rather shattering discovery. It reminds me of a famed British politician of the last century, the late Lord Curzon, who was known to be a very superior person. And they suggested that perhaps he would do something to connect with the general population. And they said, why, Lord Curzon, don't you try riding on an omnibus? He disappeared for an hour, came back severely shaken. His assistant said, my lord, you seem very troubled. What is the matter? He said, well, I got on the bus and I told the driver to take me to Eaton Square, and do you know, he wouldn't. So there we are. I thought I had gone on an omnibus, but there you are. I want to thank, of course, Lord Griffiths for all his friendship and support and all he has done and for his words tonight. For Lord Carey for nominating me for the prize and for the music tonight. To organist Gerard Brooks, who played my favorite piece of organ music, Albinoni's Adagio. I must explain that we don't do a lot of Adagio in Judaism. After 4,000 years, we still haven't learned to slow down, but we're trying. And of course, to our beloved Shabbaton Choir, to conductor Stephen Levy, to Rabbi Lionel Rosenfeld and Chazan Johnny Turgle, and the wonderful, wonderful children's choir of the Sacks Morasha Primary School. I have to tell you, I went in to the children just before the event started, just to thank them for singing tonight. And they said to me, are you speaking tonight? I said, yes. This little, wonderful little young man said, and is it going to be for very long? And I said, probably. And he said, is it going to be boring as well? I said, guilty on all counts. They are wonderful children and I much prefer this. But I know so profoundly, and I feel it so fully, that the credit for this award is not mine, but simply that of the Jewish tradition. I know what it is simply to be a dwarf on the shoulder of giants. And I've tried simply to give voice to our tradition and its prophets and sages, and to the twin imperatives of Judaism, to be true to your faith and a blessing to others, regardless of their faith. People sometimes ask me how I became a speaker, and I give the honest answer. It was very simple. I just married the world's greatest listener. So I give my thanks to Elaine and to our wonderful children, Josh, Dina, and Gila, and their lovely families, who gave me so much support. and to Joanna, Dan, and Debbie, my wonderful team. And thanks ultimately to God, who believes in us so much more than we believe in him. Friends, I want tonight to look not back but to look forward. And I want to chart new territory, if I may, tonight, and see what I see as the great challenge for us, for me, for my work, for perhaps all of us in the coming generation. You see, I want to define what I see as the central moral and spiritual challenge of our time. This is, I believe, a fateful moment in history. Because wherever you look, politically, religiously, economically, environmentally, there is insecurity and instability. It's not too much to say that the future of the West and the unique form of freedom it has pioneered for the past 4 centuries is altogether at risk. And I want tonight to look at one phenomenon that has shaped the West, leading it at first to greatness, but now to crisis. And it can be summed up in one word: outsourcing. On the face of it, nothing could be more innocent or productive. It's the basis of the modern economy. It's Adam Smith's division of labor, David Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage that says, even if you're better than me at everything, which you probably are, still we both gain if I do what I'm best at and you do what you're best at, and we trade. And that has shaped the modern world. But the question is, are there limits? Are there things we can't or shouldn't outsource? The issue has arisen because of the new technologies and instantaneous global communication. So instead of outsourcing within a community, today we do it between economies. We've seen the outsourcing of production to low-wage countries. We've seen the outsourcing of services so that you could be, for instance, in one town in America, booking a hotel room in another town in America, unaware that your call is being processed in India. Now, this seemed like a good idea at the time. It was as if the West was saying to the world, here's a good division of the labor, you do the producing, we'll do the consuming. It was a lovely idea. But is that sustainable in the long run? Then banks began to outsource risk, lending far beyond their capacities in the belief that either property prices would go on rising forever, or more significantly, if they crashed, it would be someone else's problem, not mine. But there's one form of outsourcing that tends to be little noticed, and that is the outsourcing of memory. Our computers and smartphones have developed larger and larger memories, from kilobytes to megabytes to gigabytes, while our memories and those of our children have got smaller and smaller. In fact, why bother to remember anything at all if you can look it up in a microsecond on Google or Wikipedia? But here I think we made a mistake. We confused history and memory, and they're not the same thing at all. History is an answer to the question, what happened? Memory is an answer to the question, who am I? History is about facts. Memory is about identity. History is his story. It happened to somebody else, not me. Memory is my story, the past that made me who I am, of whose legacy I am the guardian for the sake of generations yet to come. Without memory, there's no identity, and without identity, we are no more than dust on the surface of infinity. And lacking memory, I think we forgot one of the most important lessons to have emerged from the wars of religion in the 16th and 17th century and the new birth of freedom that followed. Even to say it today sounds antiquarian, but here it is. A free society is a moral achievement. Without self-restraint, without capacity to defer the gratification of instinct, without the habits of heart and deed that we call virtues, we will eventually lose our freedom. That's what John Locke meant when he contrasted liberty, the freedom to do what we ought, with license, the freedom to do what we want. It's what Adam Smith signaled when, before he wrote The Wealth of Nations, he wrote The Theory of Moral Sentiments. It's what Washington meant when he said human rights can only be assured among a virtuous people. And Benjamin Franklin when he said only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. And Jefferson when he said a nation as a society forms a moral person and every member of it is personally responsible for his society. At some point, the West abandoned this belief. When I went to Cambridge in the late 60s, that moment which Heather so beautifully recalled, the course I was studying, which is today called philosophy, was then called moral sciences, meaning that just like the natural sciences, morality was objective, real, part of the external world. But I soon discovered that almost nobody believed this anymore. Morality was, I learnt, no more than the expression of emotion or subjective feeling or private intuition or autonomous choice. It was, within limits, whatever I chose it to be. In fact, there was nothing left to study but the meaning of words. To me, this sounded less like civilization than the breakdown of a civilization. And it took me years to discover, to work out what had actually happened. And here, I believe, is what happened. Morality had been split in two and outsourced to other institutions. There were moral choices, and then on the other hand, there were the consequences of our choices. Morality itself was outsourced to the market. The market gives us choices. And morality itself is just a set of choices in which right or wrong have no meaning beyond the satisfaction or frustration of desire. The result is that today we find it increasingly hard to understand why there might be something that I want to do, can afford to do, have a legal right to do, and that nonetheless I should not do because it's unjust or dishonorable or disloyal or demeaning. In a word, unethical. Ethics has been reduced to economics. As for the consequences of our choices, these were outsourced to the state. Bad choices lead to bad outcomes, failed relationships, neglected children, depressive illness, wasted lives. But the government would deal with it. Forget about marriage as a sacred bond between husband and wife. Forget about the need of children for a loving and secure human environment. Forget about the need for communities to give us support in times of need. Welfare was outsourced to the state. As for conscience, that once played so large a part in the moral life, that could be outsourced to regulatory bodies. So having reduced moral choice to economics, we transferred the consequences of our choices to politics. And it seemed to work, at least for a while. But by now, problems have arisen that just cannot be solved by the market or the state alone. To mention just a few, the structural unemployment that follows the outsourcing of production and services, the further unemployment that will come when artificial intelligence increasingly replaces human judgment and skill, artificially low interest rates that encourage borrowing and debt and discourage saving and investment, wildly inflated CEO pay, the lowering of living standards, first of the working class, then of the middle class, the insecurity of employment, even for graduates, the inability of young families to afford a home, the collapse of marriage leading to intractable problems of child poverty and depression, the collapse of birth rates throughout Europe leading to unprecedented levels of immigration that are now the only way the West can sustain its population, and the systemic failure to integrate some of those groups. The loss of family, community, and identity that once gave us strength to survive unstable times. And there are many other problems. Why are they insoluble? First, because they're global and governments are only national. Second, because they're long-term. While the market and liberal democratic politics only deals in the short term. Third, because they depend on changing habits of behavior, which neither the market nor the liberal democratic state are mandated to do. But above all, because they can't be solved by the market and state alone. You can't outsource conscience. You can't delegate moral responsibility away. When you do, when you say somebody else will deal with it, you raise expectations that cannot be met. And when inevitably those expectations are not met, society becomes freighted with disappointment, anger, fear, resentment, and blame. People start taking refuge in magical thinking, which today takes one of four forms: the far right, the far left, religious extremism, and aggressive secularism. The far right seeks a return to a golden past that never was. The far left seeks a utopian future that never will be. Aggressive religious extremists believe you can bring salvation by terror. Aggressive secularists believe that if you get rid of religion, there will be peace. These are all fantasies, and pursuing them will endanger the very foundations of freedom. Yet we've seen, even in mainstream British and American politics, forms of ugliness I never thought I would see in my lifetime. And we've seen in university campuses in Britain and America the abandonment of academic freedom in the name of the right not to be offended by being confronted by views with which I disagree. This is le trahison d'éclair, the intellectual betrayal of our time. And it is very dangerous indeed. So is there another way? I believe there really is. Two historical phenomena have long fascinated me. One is the strange fact that, having lagged behind China for 1,000 years, the West overtook it in the 17th century, creating science, industry, technology, the free market, and the free society. How did that happen? The second is, no less strange, the fact that Jews and Judaism survived for 2,000 years after the destruction of the Second Temple, having lost every single thing on which their existence was predicated in biblical times. They lost their land, their home, their freedom, their temple, their kings, their prophets, and their priests. And the explanation in both cases is the same. And it is the precise opposite of outsourcing, namely the internalization of what had once been external. So, for instance, though Jews had lost their land, Jerusalem, the temple, nonetheless, they rebuilt them in the mind. Wherever in the world Jews prayed, there was the temple. Every prayer was a sacrifice. Every Jew a priest, every community a fragment of Jerusalem. Something similar happened in strands of Islam that interpreted jihad not as a physical war on the battlefield, but as a spiritual struggle within the soul. And it's something very similar that happened within Christianity after the Reformation, especially in the Calvinism that in the 16th and 17th centuries transformed Holland, Scotland, England of the Revolution, and America of the Pilgrim Fathers. In fact, it was that to which Max Weber famously attributed the spirit of capitalism, i.e., the external authority of the church was replaced by the internal voice of conscience. And that internalized conscience made possible the widely distributed networks of trust on which the smooth functioning of the market depends. We're so used to contrasting the material and the spiritual that we sometimes forget that the word credit comes from the Latin credo, which means I believe, anima amin. We sometimes forget that confidence, That requisite of investment and economic growth comes from fidentia, the Latin for faith or trust. What emerged in Judaism and in post-Reformation Christianity was the rarest of character types, the inner directed personality. Most societies, for most of history, have either been tradition-directed or other-directed. People do what they do because that's how it's always been done, or because that's what other people do. Inner-directed types are different. They become the pioneers, the innovators, the survivors. They have an internalized satellite navigation system, so they aren't scared of uncharted territory. They have a strong sense of duty to others. They try to have secure marriages. They hand on their values to their children. They belong to strong communities. They take daring but carefully calculated risks. And when they fail, they have rapid recovery times. They have discipline. They enjoy tough challenges and hard work. They play it long. They're more interested in sustainability than quick profits. They know they have to be responsible to customers, employees, and shareholders, as well as to the wider public, because only thus will they survive in the long run. They don't do stupid things, like creative accounting, or subprime mortgages, or falsified emissions data, because they know you can't fake it forever. They don't consume the present at the cost of the future, because they have a sense of responsibility for the future. They have the capacity to defer the gratification of instinct, and they do all this because they have an inner moral voice. Some call it conscience. Some call it the voice of God. Cultures like that stay young. They defeat entropy, the loss of energy. They dispelled the decline and fall of every other empire and superpower in history. But somehow the West has, in the immortal words of Queen Elsa in Frozen, I hope you get my rabbinic reference here, the West has let it go. It has externalized what it once internalized. It has outsourced responsibility. It's reduced ethics to economics and politics, which means we are dependent on the market and the state, forces we can do little to control. And one day, our children or grandchildren or theirs will turn back and ask, how did the West lose what once made it great? Every observer of the grand sweep of history, from the prophets of Israel to the Islamic sage Ibn Khaldun, from Giambattista Vico to John Stuart Mill, from Bertrand Russell to Will Durant, has said essentially the same thing, that civilizations begin to die when they lose the moral passion that brought them into being in the first place. It happened to Greece and Rome, and it can happen to the West. The sure signs are these: a falling birth rate, moral decay, growing inequalities, a loss of trust in social institutions, self-indulgence on the part of the rich, hopelessness on the part of the poor, unintegrated minorities, a failure to make sacrifices in the present for the sake of the future, a loss of faith in old beliefs, and no new vision to take their place. These are the danger signals, and they are flashing now. There is an alternative: to strive to become inner-directed again. This means recovering the moral dimension that links our welfare to the welfare of others, making us collectively responsible for the common good. It means recovering the spiritual dimension that helps us tell the difference between the value of things and their price. We are more than consumers and voters. Our dignity transcends what we earn and own. It means remembering that what's important isn't just satisfying our desires, but also knowing which desires to satisfy. It means restraining ourselves in the present so that our children may have a viable future. It means reclaiming collective memory and identity so that society becomes less of a hotel and more of a home. In short, it means learning that there are some things we cannot or should not outsource, some responsibilities we cannot and should not delegate away. We owe it to our children and grandchildren not to throw away what once made the West great. And not for the sake of some idealized past, but for the sake of a demanding and deeply challenging future. If we do simply let it go, if we continue to forget that a free society is a moral achievement that depends on responsibility and restraint, then what will come next, be it Russia or China or ISIS or Iran, will neither be liberal nor democratic, and it will certainly not be free. We need to restate the moral and spiritual dimensions in the language of the 21st century, using the media of the 21st century to inspire, to give hope, and to unite. The moral and spiritual dimensions of human flourishing are what the Templeton Prize and the Templeton Foundation have always been about. And I pray and I hope that it will be by developing these themes globally, together with others, over the coming years, that I hope I can repay a little of the honor you have bestowed on me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Sacks. May I submit that perhaps each one of us is in a position to put ourselves in a situation where we might address some of the issues Rabbi Sacks spoke of in his talk. Before we hear one more selection from the Shabbaton Choir and the Sacks Morasha Primary School Choir, a piece called Oseh Shalom, which was written in 2008 to celebrate the 60th anniversary of Israel. We have one more speaker who is not listed in your program. Rabbi Sacks' daughter, Gila, wanted to take a few moments to share her thoughts about her father. Gila?
Members of our family will never learn that you never, ever follow. Good evening. Firstly, I would like to thank the Templeton Family and Foundation for allowing me to share a few thoughts this evening on behalf of my brother Josh, my sister Dina, and our families, and to thank them for honouring our father in this extraordinary way. You have made him very happy, and for that, Josh, Dina, and I are so grateful. Many wonderful things have been said tonight about our father and what he has achieved. But I was asked to say a few words about what he has taught us, his children. I thought that would be easy. But it turns out that it is next to impossible to separate out what a parent has taught you from the you that you are, to know where to start, to find the words. So let me just tell you 3 things about our dad. Before I do, it may be a cliche, but it's the truest one I know. I don't think he would mind me saying that whatever he has done, he could not have done any of it at all without the strength which he and we get from our amazing mum. So all the praise spoken this evening is of course hers too. Ben Zoma famously asks in the Mishnah in Tractate Avot, who is wise? One who learns from everyone. And that's the first thing I want to tell you about my father. He learns and learns and learns from everyone. His excitement at new ideas, at meeting somebody interesting, at discovering a great book, doesn't lessen with time in any way. The more he knows, the more he wants to learn. His absolute commitment to learning everything, to seeing all knowledge as important, to taking as seriously a conversation about business as one about ethics or science or art, to taking as seriously the search for excellence in any field. When I was younger, no matter what I was studying at school or university, no matter what the essay topic, if I mentioned it to my dad, he would immediately walk over to the bookcase and pick off the exact book I needed. He learns from everyone, and we learn this from him. Ben Zoma continues, who is rich? One who is happy with what he has. When I thought about my father and what he has taught me, I don't think I expected happiness to be what came to mind. I'm not sure his happiness is what most immediately stands out about him, or what many people see. And yet the more I thought about it, the more I realized that he has in fact taught me some very important things about how to be happy. He taught me that happiness is as much something we choose as something we find, that it can be hard work, but it can be worked at. And I learned from the happiness he finds in the world, even the world when the world is a difficult place too. His joy at a beautiful view, a great walk, a moving piece of music, his undiminishing joy in spending simple, happy times with my mum, the happiness he gets from each of his grandchildren. To be happy with what one has, teaches Ben Zoma, does not mean settling for what you have, but really finding the happiness in where you are, enjoying the fruits of this world, this day. And that is the second thing which we learn from my father, and perhaps that sometimes he learns from us too. And thirdly, and most importantly of all, we have learnt from his faith, not just in God, but in the ability and responsibility of each of us to make a difference in some way. To not ever just accept the world as we find it, but to always, always believe it can be different, and to believe that there is no reason at all that that difference can't be something to do with us. This was not for us some grand calling to go out and change the world. It was simply a way of looking at the world, to always see in it the potential for good, the potential for change, and to always see ourselves as having the ability to make a difference, never just passive observers. My father's faith in the ability of things to change and people to change them is what I am most grateful for. Because sometimes when it's hard for me to believe, it's enough for me to know that he does. And because he's the cleverest person I know, he's probably therefore right. And I think his faith is, in this way, empowering for so many people whose lives he has touched. Even when they might not always be able to believe that things can change, knowing that he does helps them to do more to make that change happen. Ben Zoma concludes the Mishnah, who is honored? One who brings honor to others. By believing in us, in our potential for good and our responsibility for good, my father brings honor to so many. And in the life that he leads and the Torah that he teaches, he brings honor to God. And so it is right that this evening he is being honored. Thank you.
this Osir Shalom, verse with which we conclude every prayer service. God who makes peace in his high places, may he make peace over us and over all Israel. Amen? Would you please do us the honor of joining us in this song?
Shalom bimromav, v'yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol Yisrael, v'yimaru, v'yimaru, amen.
Shalom bimromav, v'yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol Yisrael, v'yimaru,
Shalom bimromav, v'yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol Yisrael, v'yimaru,
Thank you so much to the Shabbaton Choir, to the soloists, Rabbi Lionel Rosenfeld and Johnny Turgle, the Sacks, Morasha, Jewish primary school, who I am told still have school tomorrow, so thank you for joining us this evening. Our pianist, Stuart Izon, and to Gerard Brooks, the director of music here at Central Hall Westminster, for the deep and meaningful music this evening. Thank you very much. In closing, I hope you now have a sense of the exemplary type of person that the Templeton Prize recognizes. In our view, there are no other prizes in the world similar to the Templeton Prize, because we aim to honor those who contribute to a deeper human understanding of spiritual realities. Through insights, as we have heard tonight, through discoveries, and through practical work. And indeed, Rabbi Sacks represents all three. For Sir John and for my father, each Templeton Prize laureate was a blessing, because each Templeton Prize laureate enhances our understanding of the human spirit that somehow connects all of us to each other and to the natural world. Anybody in the world can nominate somebody to be considered for the Templeton Prize. Every single person in this room can nominate somebody to be considered for the Templeton Prize. Anybody watching the video can nominate somebody to be considered for the Templeton Prize. The application process available at our website is simple, streamlined, and the criteria are clearly articulated. Your nominations are carefully considered, and they are passed on to 9 independent judges who make the decision for each Templeton Prize laureate, independent of the John Templeton Foundation. Please take time to think about this, because there are people out there who you know about that we have not heard about. I encourage each of you to consider who you might nominate for the Templeton Prize, and to remember that our nominations for the 2017 prize are due on June 1st in just a few days, so think quickly. And so again, in the spirit of Sir John and my father, Dr. Templeton, and on behalf of the John Templeton Foundation, the trustees of the John Templeton Foundation, and the judges of the Templeton Prize, thank you for being here tonight to honor Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. Before we adjourn, I would like to invite all the faith leaders represented here tonight to join us on stage, and Lady Sacks, for a few pictures. If you would stay in your seats until the pictures are over, Gerard Brooks will play another piece on the organ, and then you will be dismissed to a reception that is downstairs, and we will join you there. Again, thank you.